It has truly been the best and worst of weeks for President Donald Trump. Now, coming off the White House meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, that was all going great until the last minute when the beleaguered Ukrainian president got into a shouting match with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Well, after that, the commander-in-chief needed a win. And a win he got. This week, Trump addressed a joint session of Congress. It was not technically a State of the Union, but effectively it was the same sort of thing, and he got what he was looking for. Not just because he dropped a long, 100-minute-long speech without a hitch, but because the Democrats, still reeling from their loss in November and completely unable to deal with Trump's victory in November, were able to deal with it. But despite all that, there is still a bit of trouble on the horizon. But first, in case you missed it, here's some highlights of the speech. Now, the theme was, naturally, American renewal and a great American comeback.
Our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging bigger and better than ever before. The American dream is unstoppable, and our country is on the verge of a comeback, the likes of which the world has never witnessed and perhaps will never witness again.
Trump also called for tax cuts for every American, paid for by tariffs.
And the next phase of our plan to deliver the greatest economy in history is for this Congress to pass tax cuts for everybody. They're in there. They're waiting for you to vote. And I'm sure that the people on my right, I don't mean the Republican right, but my right here, I'm sure you're going to vote for those tax cuts, because otherwise I don't believe the people will ever vote you into office. So I'm doing you a big favor by telling you that.
And not only did he troll all the Democrats in that room there, he reeled off long lists. And here's just a sample of ridiculous stuff the American taxpayer had been forced to pay for in the pre-Doge era.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
Well, not surprisingly, the Democrats, who went to the last election calling themselves the Party of Joy, turned out to be churlish through the entire speech. They couldn't even clap when Trump announced the capture of one of the terrorists involved in the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan. Watch them on the right of your screen when the camera pans to the audience.
Tonight, I am pleased to announce that we have just apprehended the top terrorist responsible for that atrocity, and he is right now on his way here to face the swift sword of American justice.
Oh, Trump, what a monster, catching terrorists! How dare he? Oh, well, anyway, that's the Democrats for you. Trump also, and I want you to watch this, he talked about things like keeping biological men out of women's sport. And not only did Republicans, but most of the audience went nuts when he did so. Watch this worm here from one of the major TV networks that shows the reactions of Republican, Independent, and Democrat voters as he talked about the subject.
And I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
And that, folks, is why Trump won. Trump also, in his speech, went further than previous presidents who normally call out members of the audience to illustrate policy points. Well, he went the next step, bestowing gifts and prizes.
Jason's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather all wore the uniform. Jason tragically lost his dad, who was also a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy when he was just a boy, and now he wants to carry on the family legacy of service. Jason is a senior in high school, a six-letter varsity athlete, a really good athlete, they say, a brilliant student with a 4.46, that's good, GPA. And his greatest dream is to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Jason, that's a very big deal getting in. That's a hard one to get into. But I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been accepted. You will soon be joining the Corps of Cadets.
Well, congratulations to Jason, but the Democrats sat on their hands. And you know what? This, I thought, was the most disgraceful bit. They couldn't even clap when Trump made this young lad who's been suffering from brain cancer but has always dreamed of being a cop an honorary member of the Secret Service.
I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
How lovely is that? But the Democrats, well, they sat stone silent through that. Yes, even for that lovely moment. But it actually gets worse. This MSNBC host had a reaction to that moment that I can only say was well and truly deranged, suggesting if that young man became a cop, well, you know what? You listen.
And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
Understand what just happened here. This kid was made an honorary Secret Service member. It's a lifelong dream. He's got cancer. And this woman is saying if he becomes a cop, she hopes he doesn't kill himself dealing with J6ers. How utterly sick, how utterly bizarre. But I'll tell you what. They didn't like it there at MSNBC, but the speech was a massive win with the viewers. 76% of those who watched it approved of the speech. 63% said Trump spent a lot of times on the issues they cared about, according to that YouGov poll there. But for Trump, this is great. But also, I got to do this too and inject a cautious note, because you can already start to see where the storm clouds are gathering around tariffs, trade, foreign policy, and the economy. In Europe, Donald Trump is being accused of deserting American leadership over Ukraine. After decades of bad policies around welfare and immigration and energy, Europeans have suddenly realized they can't keep putting their defense and all their other dumb decisions on the American credit card. But if it means the end of NATO and a militarily resurgent Europe, well, history is not a happy guide on that one. And all this gives his enemies a new line that America is unreliable under Trump and not a friend, can't be counted on. But in doing so, what they're essentially doing is reviving the old Russia, Russia, Russia line, saying that Trump is acting as an agent of Putin. It's wild stuff, but this is, yes, what they are going with. Now, Trump has also given automakers a short reprieve on tariffs, but again, the on-again, off-again nature of the policy suggests that Trump himself is using the tariff stick for something other than the economy. And Mexico, too, has won a reprieve from the tariffs for a month, suggesting we are in a negotiating cycle of provoke, negotiate, delay, and see where things land. But the final caution here, the Atlanta Fed is predicting a steep nosedive in the economy in the coming quarter, which means the media will be playing up the idea of a Trump session, fairly or not. So my takeaway is Trump had a hell of a good week with an incredibly good speech that got the American people behind him, but the media and his foes are coming. So for the Trump administration, warning bells are ringing. Well, joining me now is Sky News Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen. Annalise, thanks for coming on the program tonight, and we've got to talk about this big Trump address. Now, it seems to have been a really big hit with voters, but what did you make of the address, and specifically the way the Democrats were completely churlish and refused to applaud even a kid with cancer? And the dominant image from the night was an old man, Al Green, waving a stick at Donald Trump like the proverbial old man yells at clouds.
Look, I think what people might not realize is that the partisanship started well before Donald Trump even got in the room. So some of the normal procedures that happen for a State of the Union include a bipartisan delegation escorting the president in. And that didn't happen this time around. The Democrats said from the beginning they wouldn't do that. Basically, none of the Democrats stood while Donald Trump walked into Congress before he delivered his address, the exception being that one congresswoman who held up a sign saying this is not normal as a protest. And they had all planned that protest to wear the pink and to have the signs. And so the groundwork was laid for this well before Donald Trump even had a chance to speak. But by the same token, we did really anticipate exactly what Donald Trump was going to say. It was a very stump-style speech, the kind that we've heard at his rallies for a long time. But I found that interesting in and of itself as well. This wasn't his big retribution tour. This wasn't him, the harbinger of doom and gloom, like we'd been warned that he was going to come back with a vengeance. This was him painting a very optimistic picture. This was him saying that this is the new golden age and enjoying it. He was kind of playful when he was getting shouted down by Al Green, when he was facing protests, and he made good TV out of it, which is what we know of Donald Trump. And I'm not saying there's not retribution to come. I'm not saying he doesn't have some axes to grind. But to establish what this next term is going to be, this was a major moment in this Congress, this joint address. And as you said, record viewers.
Record viewers, and I think 72% of CBS viewers who watched the speech said they approved of the speech. So does this create a problem then for the Democrats, because the midterms are going to be on the horizon before we know it, if they're looking like they're completely churlish? And I mean, you could imagine the ads where they say the Democrats won't even stand and honor, for example, the victim of an illegal immigrant who'd been killed, like Laken Riley. And, you know, he gave a very moving talk about that. And then they just sat on their hands.
Oh, and when you won't stand for the US detaining a terrorist who helped kill American servicemen. And I tell you, the number of people I've spoken to over the last week where I've mentioned that and they don't remember what Abbey-gate was. And there is a real divide in America between people who remember and appreciate what a disaster the withdrawal from Afghanistan was and those who just kind of compartmentalized it and moved on. And that division remains. This is still just a very divided population in terms of what they value and what media they consume. And I know we talk about this a lot, but it is such a factor in the US with people, what they consume, and otherwise shut out the other information. And this is why we're seeing this big reset from the White House about how they deal with the press.
Well, it is fascinating because I did spend a couple of hours the morning after the speech reading the New York Times and the Washington Post, and specifically the reader comments. And it does feel like there really are two Americas out there, and they just saw an entirely different speech. But I want to shift on here because we've got so much else to talk about. There has been a lot of talk, obviously, about DOGE and the Department of Government Efficiency, but some of the waste that's being turned up elsewhere is amazing to me, and I was stunned by this revelation in the New York Post. It seems like the Biden administration was shoveling billions of dollars out the door and putting them through bogus charities, including $20 billion to some environmental charities that were brand new, so brand new that they did not even appear in the IRS's charity database. Annalise, this stinks. Can the Trump administration get any of this money back? And more importantly, where did this money go? To line the pockets of Democrats to fight the Trump agenda, I presume.
I guess that's where Elon Musk comes in. But look, James, this is the really interesting thing in all this. The Democrats were basically bragging about this when they were in their final days in office, saying we've done as much as we can to get as much spending out the door to make sure that we can protect climate action. This is exactly what their supporters wanted. And to go back to your earlier point about Democrats, I mean, staring down midterms, we do have to remember it was only 4 years ago that we thought the Republican Party was lost for all eternity, that they were so bereft of leadership that they had no chance. With Donald Trump now out, they had no set leadership. So the Democrats absolutely can come back. But right now, they are just a mess. They have no clear leader because they built everything around Joe Biden, who was so obviously in the throes of cognitive decline, and the entire leadership locked everyone else out, kept them down just to keep Joe Biden in place. And so they don't have any next generation that's ready to stand up and take the lead. When we're talking about who might be the next Democrat president of the United States, they're talking about Tim Walz, who somehow, being a popular governor in Minnesota, apparently managed to lose that own benefit in the last election result. They had a smaller Democrat turnout in their own state. This is the state that, when it was the Reagan landslide, still held on for Mondale, wasn't it? It's just like, so I just, that they are completely lost in the wilderness at the moment. But it's not saying that they couldn't come back.
Yeah, and I'll be talking a little bit later in the program with Mick Mulvaney about another interesting development on that front, so stay tuned for that. But also we need to talk about Ukraine and the latest that's happening there. A week on from that heated exchange between Trump and J.D. Vance and Zelensky in the White House, well, we now have confirmation that the U.S. has cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine for the first time since 2022. Now, this comes after they'd already halted shipments of military aid to Ukraine. This isn't going down very well with an awful lot of people in Washington, and I got to say across America as well, who think this is going too far. Is this a push to get Zelensky back to the table, and will it work?
Well, it was interesting. The day that that story came out, we had the White House National Security Director and Zelensky both saying that they were preparing to meet that day in response to that. So on the one hand, it does seem like it's working, but on the other hand, for all the discussion around is this bully tactics from America, is it not? This is just the one that seems the most punitive for no real reason. To cut off aid, to cut off further funding, to cut off any further munitions going there, that's all a bottom line question. And they've been very clear from the Trump administration they don't want to send any more money over there. So that's one thing. But to cut off intelligence sharing that you should be already doing regardless. And then I think that's the other unsaid half of this equation. Is this the US saying that they're not gathering this intelligence anymore in that part of the world? Because that's really something that is going to be weakening the US influence around the world and, of course, weakening the Europeans. This is where the US is supposed to be so superior. Or are they getting this information and just not sharing it to punish the Ukrainians and make them more vulnerable? That scene is just very punitive.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to watch this and see how it goes. We've already seen how Europe has reacted. And if there's any good thing about this to come out, it would seem that they're starting to take their own defense seriously in Europe. So maybe that's a silver lining here. Annalise Nielsen, thank you so much for joining me as always.